welcome back to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and joining me today is Lori.
Hello.
And T.
Hey, everyone.
This is episode 25, which we're calling them Reactionary Masks. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. So reactionary masks is going to be a little bit of an interesting topic. We're going to do our best to not point fingers at any one group, thing, or stuff going on, but we did want to talk about how we react to the things that we hear, because so much is going on in the world, a war in Ukraine, shootings in schools, just pick a topic. I mean, even the price of gas is up to, over $5 a gallon, and poor truck drivers, and the diesel cost is like $6 or more in most places, and at least here in Washington. And there's just so much going on, and it's how we choose to react and how we want to talk about it, because I think we all want to talk about it and have discussions. Unfortunately, not everybody reacts the same way, and some groups, and we're not going to say names or anything because I don't feel like that's fair either, but some groups choose to react a certain way, and or one way or the other, or certain people have choices, and I don't want to say that they're wrong because they're choosing to react in that way, and that's their choice. We also, the three of us, are in different walks of life, and we're also in a professional environment oftentimes where we want to maintain some neutrality in the sense of like how we react. Like, I was raised personally to not talk about politics, religion, or money with anybody. That was how I was raised, because those were things that were very touchy topics.
They still are.
And they still are, agreeably. Yes. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. And that's why, and in the Bible, it teaches us, don't judge, love everybody equally, treat others how you want to be treated. So that's the kind of conversation we're going to have, is discussing, like, when you hear something, maybe try and fact check it a little bit before you start talking about it. And when we hear stuff that's going on, like, I was extremely distraught when I heard that there was a school shooting not long ago. And there's been others since then, and there's been other shootings, not just school shootings, and how that can affect us. And I want to say that you're allowed to have a reaction. Anger, frustration, sadness, depression, that's all feelings and emotions you're allowed to have. But it's how you go from feeling those emotions to going the next step, is what you do next, is kind of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we're going to, I've always been one of those people and learned throughout the years. I want us, the three of us today, to model what healthy communication looks like, what healthy discourse looks like. We don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to be yes people, no people. We don't have to be reactionary people. We can be highly intelligent, emotionally and mentally. And I think personally that emotional intelligence is probably one of the biggest keys to being successful in being less reactionary. And emotional intelligence is something I feel very, very passionate about. And I feel like we all need to engage in it more and learn how to be more emotionally intelligent. So I'm hoping that what we're going to be doing today is modeling how to do that. Because I'm a stand in the gap, see a need, fill a need kind of girl. And as EJ mentioned, all over social media, in the news, in every conversation, I was literally in the produce department on Wednesday, and just doing something very simple. And some customer said something, and next thing you know, I was in the middle of a political conversation. And I was like, how did I get here in the produce department? And it wasn't, it wasn't a bad conversation, but it was just very odd that I was speaking with a stranger about the current political, status and what was going on. And we were kind of agreeing upon a few things, though he said some things that I was like, well, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, you know.
Right.
Um, but it was just really interesting because I think these conversations, these reactions can come anywhere nowadays, whether it's road rage, right? We have higher levels of road rage than we've ever had. We have, shootings, we have actual divides in our country over politics. And, um, everything seems to be, everything really seems to be, who am I supposed to blame? That we have to lay blame at someone's feet or doorstep, if you will, that somebody must be causing this, and I either have to agree with them or, get on that bandwagon or get off.
Right.
And I feel like that's not healthy, and it's not unifying, and it's so divisive. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. T, I was hoping you could shed some light on, just from that counseling point of view, what exactly this, how the mental health piece fits into this reactionary driven society that we currently seem to be engaged in.
Yeah. So first of all, in the field, we call it being reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are more prone to it than others just naturally. But I do want to kind of cut back to something that's, I think, falls at the foundation of the situation, and that's our choice. Most people react not realizing they have a choice in how they react, that they can stop and pause and decide what they're going to do next. And so that's the first step, is just knowing you have a choice. People, I think there's a sense of sort of with everything so instantaneous right now, like we have instantaneous access to so much, and we get in this frame of mind in which we get instant satisfaction, we get instant gratification. I know those seem like the same thing. Everyone has a voice now, everyone, to the point that now no one has a voice, because we can comment on anything. We can get up on our little platforms and scream to the top of our voices of what we think. But what we aren't seeing is any change. Like, we're not there to change someone's mind when we do that. We're there to scream our own reactions, our own feelings. And then nobody's listening, because unless it fits their narrative, if it fits their narrative, then they're listening. So then we're getting people coming back with, we either get validated because people agree with us and that feels good, or people fight with us, but then we get gratification from the fact that there are people on our side and it's us against them. And so then that becomes the mentality, is it's us against them, and everything becomes concrete. So I mean, I was actually having a similar conversation with a friend this morning, that it's all become so tangled. But there's this concept of what's called homeostasis, and that's at our cellular level, that everything within our bodies, within the world, wants to seek the middle. But we're on a pendulum swing right now. So everything's swinging from one extreme to the other, and we're having a hard time resting in the middle. So I think those things are factors that we're dealing with, but it's being aware that when we read something on social media and we're having a reaction to it, we're reacting to a thing rather than the person saying it, because we have no idea about that person and who they are and what their authority is. Right. So I think those
I
all
have
play,
I
all
have
that
a
plays into it.
question, T, because I want to make sure I understand. So at our core being, us humans, we desire to have that balance or inner
Right.
peace, right? Okay.
Right. Everything within us seeks the middle. It doesn't, like ourselves, if they're on one extreme or another, there's an illness, there's something wrong. So it works to stay in that middle. I'm simplifying it greatly, but that's what it, though, everything within us seeks. And a lot of things within the world too, most things within the world seek that middle ground. And when it's not in the middle, it's fighting to get to that middle.
Okay, so now I have another question then. So I want to word this in a way that does not sound judgmental. So what happens or what is going on with certain people when they seem to be validated only when they're, as you said, screaming their opinion out? Because there do seem to be people that are motivated by getting reactions. Is that because they're out of their own sync with their humans' desire for homeostasis, or what is that a signal of?
Well, I'm using homeostasis as sort of a way to describe just nature, just wanting this to be in the middle ground. As far as people who seem to get something out of that,
I was trying to
discord.
word that very delicately.
Yeah, there's sometimes you find, and I think any of us can find ourselves in that position at times of getting something out of the discord.
Yes,
And I
yes.
think it's a complicated topic, and I don't think there's one single answer that would fit everyone. And I think that's the other piece that we're kind of fighting with, is that we're trying to find things that fit everybody. And when you do that, someone's going to miss out, because there really isn't any way to it's not a one size fits all situations. Most of these things that are going on, there's not one simple answer. It's very complicated, and we're trying to put them in very neat, tidy little boxes, and it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So
You mean life is messy?
yeah, life is messy. Life is messy, and we have emotions that we haven't, I feel like we've moved away from learning to tolerate negative emotions. And so we don't like negative emotions, so we're going to avoid it. And so we're trying to make everything fit, to be happy all the time. If we're sad or mad or frightened, then we're not doing it right. And oh, by the way, there's a pill for that. So what I think a lot of what we're dealing with is people have forgotten that being sad and angry and afraid and all of those feelings that we don't like are there for a reason. Those feelings exist because it serves a purpose. Being afraid serves the purpose of letting us know that there might be danger nearby. Being angry serves us a purpose to get ready to deal with something that might be difficult. Sometimes anger propels us to make a change in our circumstances. Being sad is a natural reaction to something that is sad. So we have no tolerance for that, though. There's no tolerance for it. We panic and feel like we have to fix it immediately, and then instead of just sitting with it.
I can totally talk about myself in that one. And it doesn't even have to be, it's not even political. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just thinking, so first off, anybody who's watching on YouTube or on the video, this is going to be the last time you're going to see this background. So I'm going to be moving, and when it kind of came up suddenly, or at least suddenly to me, I don't like change. I like things to stay very linear. I know what I'm doing, and not in a contentment sort of way, but in a, when things are settled and calm, I'm good, like mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. So something happened, some finances shifted, some hours, lost some hours. Then a client got a new caregiver, so I didn't need to work with them anymore. So it's kind of some shifts, and I didn't have any more, I had to make a choice. And the choice that was approached to me was, Lori was like, so for those of you who don't know, I live in Tacoma, Washington. Lori lives across the state on the other side of Washington, 5 hours away. And she says, well, I have an extra bedroom and a whole lot of space that you could store your stuff if you want to move in with me. And we've been roommates before, so it wouldn't be like anything foreign for me. I lost it. And for like 2 days, I was distraught. I didn't even want to consider it, but I was so mad that it was like my only option. And I was just doing, and I just wanted balance. I just wanted to fix it. And I'm like, I got to fix it. I got to fix it. And I was so emotional. I just didn't want to make that decision to make a choice, because I knew but now that I've made the choice, it's like, okay, I want to get it done. Like, I don't want to sit around and do it. Like, I've decided I'm going to move because it's financially, it's physically, it's emotionally going to be the best choice for me. I don't know the church over in Spokane that well. So I don't know, because that's going to be the closest church for me. So I don't know how well I'm going to settle in spiritually, but I'm praying that it's going to be the right move for me. But, I've sought advice. I've talked with people, trusted people that have given me decent and healthy advice, pro and against, that I've weighed back and forth. And I've made the decision to go ahead and move, because we're not meant to be stationary in the same spot. God did not create us to stay in the same spot. If that was the case, Jesus would never have left, Bethlehem or, any of those places that he was at, because he would have just gotten content. But that's not what God wants us to do. He wants us to be able to ebb and flow like the ocean and move. And I think for me, if I can just nail down and feel comfortable in that situation, like, that reaction for me was extremely raw and extremely emotional and extremely hard, but that was my choice at the time. But even after a couple of days of that, I realized, okay, Erin, you really got to nail this down, because this is just not you. And even Lori told me, she's like, Erin, this is not you. She's like, I was getting a little worried about you, because I was bawling my eyes out for hours on the phone with her, just even at the consideration of moving. And yes, there's a lot of factors to that. I'm moving away from all I've ever known on Western Washington to move to a completely different place for me than I've ever lived before. So it is a big move, but it's going to be a good move if I just look at it as a good move. Now, translate that to some of the stuff going on. Some people fly off the handle when something happens, and that's okay, because they're reacting to it. But sometimes that's not healthy. And it's who witnesses that can start making people concerned. Lori was really the only one that saw me extremely distraught about the move. Other people probably would have had a panic attack at how I was reacting, because they would have never seen me like that before. So I don't know how they would have taken it if I would have been like that around them. But
Good thing we've been besties for a long time. I handled it okay.
So,
yeah.
so some feedback on what you're talking about. Let's talk about the difference between having a reaction and being reactive.
Yes,
So having
let's
a
do that.
reaction is your thermometer. It's a way to gauge how you're feeling, right? And that's what you did. And that's, your feelings did exactly what they were supposed to. They alerted you to a problem. They let you know that there was an issue and it needed to be dealt with. You were having a reaction that was out of character for you. So you were able to notice, Lori was able to notice, etc. And it allowed you to be in a position to take stock and go, okay, so I have some choices here. You didn't deny that those feelings were real or that they mattered.
Right.
you just said, okay, so I can't keep going like this. And you made choices and decisions. Being reactive or reactionary, however you want to put that, is when you do those things and have those reactions and then don't resolve them. And so it seems like a fine line, but I know when I am in that place of being reactive, like I'm one of those people, if you tell me no, I just do it anyway. And so, and even if there's that phrase, cut your nose off to spite your face, I so will do that if I'm not careful, because I know that about myself. I know that I can be very reactive. I don't like being told no, at least not, straight up without
No.
some discussion, or I don't like being told what to do. And so even if what I'm being told to do is the correct thing or whatever, I know that I'm likely to cut my nose off to spite my face. So that's that's being reactive when it heads down that place of doing things that aren't good for you or anyone else, or doing it just because you're reacting willy-nilly. But having a reaction to a situation is healthy and normal, because it comes from the place. Our reactions are also informed by our history and our experiences and whatnot. So yeah, my head cold is kind of getting in the way, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, I was thinking, T, that one of the things, this is where healthy emotional intelligence comes in. You said there's a difference. It's when we don't resolve those emotions, when we don't appropriately handle them, deal with them. That's when we have issues, problems, if you will.
Or if our emotions and our reactions and our thoughts trumps everybody else's.
Right.
That can also be an issue when we don't allow for others. I also wanted to kind of touch base on another terminology that's been used, and that's judgment. We don't want to judge others. We don't want to do this. There's a difference between judging and discerning.
Okay,
And
let's talk about that. What's that difference?
So judging is casting judgment. It's casting either or onto someone or something, and saying, this is right or this is wrong. Discernment is sort of saying, this doesn't work for me or it works for me, is my simplified version of that. When we judge others, we're saying that they've done something right or wrong, and therefore they could be, there's a sense of punishment to it, or guilt or shame and all those things. Discernment is just simply saying, I know what works for me. I know what my values are. I know what this, I know that. And this just it's either going to work for me or it's not going to work for me. But you do you, boo.
Yeah. I was thinking that when I, just as a lay person on the other side, when I think about judgment and discernment, I've learned a lot through counseling and through years of experience that when I'm engaging in judgment, you're right, there's things associated with that: guilt, shame, anger, even frustration. Those are negative emotions that are definitely associated with judgment, whether it's on myself or on others. And whereas when I'm being discerning, the things that come with that are peace, grace, mercy, forgiveness, all of those things come into play. And again, for myself and for others. So learning that feelings are feelings. They're not right or wrong. So if a feeling is not right or wrong, then why, what is it? Is there something about us in this human nature that we need to take something that should have no right or wrong and make it right or wrong?
I
Does that make
think, I think that's sort of our, let me think about my answer for a second. So feelings in and of themselves are not right or wrong for that person experiencing them. We may look at it and say, well, it doesn't really fit the situation in our opinion. That's kind of discernment. That's saying, well, that I don't understand why they're having such a strong feeling. I wouldn't have that strong feeling, right? Judgment is you shouldn't have that strong feeling. You shouldn't feel that at all. That's judging. Discernment is just understanding that that's not what that person is experiencing, not what I'm experiencing. And I
that
think
makes sense?
I think that there are certainly I feel like what we're seeing right now currently is that people have forgotten how to cope with feelings. They have forgotten how to moderate what they're doing and what they're saying, and not getting all the facts, and just reacting. Like I said, reacting by itself is not a problem, but it can become a problem when all you're doing is reacting rather than giving thought and to what you're doing out of those feelings.
Yeah, you and I have talked before, and I think this is a good place to bring up. So one of the, so when we're, and I know we're going to dig into this, but we've briefly touched on the fact that we can get facts and that we can, before we react, and that we should, that's a healthy response, right? Trying to fully understand what it is we're reacting to is of course a huge sign of emotional intelligence and healthiness. But when we do that, so let's say we we're online, and you and I've run into this with some of our friends before, where, okay, whatever topic it is, whether it's gun violence or who's going to be the next Supreme Court justice, or, we just had this whole Johnny Depp, Amber Heard thing, I mean, there's just so much going on, right? And so oftentimes some of us do engage in what we think is research, but where did that research come from? And you have often in conversations you and I've had brought up the difference between, what is it, causation and correlation.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, just a sec. Sorry about that. I was getting breakfast delivered with some OJ.
I love it.
So anyway, so correlation and causation. So one of the things I'm going to kind of start off with is when I was in statistics and I learned the difference between correlation and, in the whole causation subject, one of the things that was used to encompass it, I still use to this day because I think it's the perfect example of this topic. And that's there was a study done in Arizona that found that when ice cream sales went up, so did murder rates. So that's a correlation. As one thing goes up, so does something else, or as one thing goes down, so does something else. And that's oftentimes when we're presented with information, and I'm gonna say it on social media and even in the mainstream media, we're presented with this information. Studies say, but what we're not realizing is they're providing us correlations. So if we go back to that example, as ice cream sales go up, so does murder rates. Well, that's a correlation. That's a relationship. That's not causation. It does not tell us what the cause is, but we can assume and are meant to assume that it's, ice cream sales are the problem. So if we stop selling ice cream, murder rates will go down. No, there was a third factor that wasn't considered in that example, and that's heat. Heat goes up. Heat is going up, ice cream sales go up, and so does murder rates. Now, when we take that into consideration, we have a better picture.
Right.
And so that's what we're dealing a lot with when we're presented with information and summaries from studies, is we don't all have time to go read the research. And frankly, it bores me to tears to read the research verbatim straight out of the, results.
It is a little dry.
It's a little dry, and we're not all trained for it, right? Like even with my background and my training, there's times I'll read the statistics. I can't even say it. So, how am I going to read it? And so I think it would be really important for people to get some basic concepts though, that go into research studies, to understand what they're seeing when they're being provided with information, things to use as questions.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's really important because, even as somebody that grew up in the time when we had social media and like even you started using computers in school where we had to do research papers and stuff, like there were certain websites, even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we weren't even allowed to use as a source because it can be easily edited on by somebody else.
Right.
So the facts aren't always accurate because it can be changed easily.
Right, exactly. So here's some things I would share to look for that any of us can look for. First of all, know the source, which is what you're saying, Jay. I'm going to say it, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for it, but Wikipedia is not a source. That's one of those sites that can be edited by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you're considering source, is that their expertise? And I would, if you're looking for serious information, I would avoid individuals and look for universities or, and even then right now I'm a little cautious on that because I've recently had an experience in which I was looking up what the research was saying about a topic and ran into another problem, which I was grateful to have the knowledge to recognize, but not everybody does. Right. So that leads to the next thing. Who are they studying when they did their research? Does it fit, or is it too broad, or is it too narrow? And did they have enough people to represent the whole? And that's another piece that's really important, is understanding that if I go out and I study 10 people, does that 10 people of this educational background, let's say I said, okay, I want to know what counselors think about this, and I only pull 10, does that represent all counselors?
Right.
Is that a big enough number? And it's called the N. So is that a big enough N to get these are what we decide as the outcomes? So what is the source? Who are they studying? How many are they studying? And then what type of results are they representing? Are they representing correlation, which is one of the simplest studies to do, and is a very, very important. Correlations are important at the start of research because you want to look for relationships, but it's not the end all be all and not the final answer. And so if someone's telling you, as ice cream sales go up, so do murder rates, question if there's other factors.
Right.
So that's sort of my bit on that.
Right. And it's important to know that. And and even as you go through school, like even the kids now are taught with, like, you're right, Wikipedia is not a source. It's a great for general information gathering, but it will source at the bottom of the page where you get your research. And then you go to those pages and you get your information. And even coming from, again, research papers or something like that, you cite your sources, and that leaves the people reading it an opportunity to go to those direct sources and get that information. And when you're doing a research paper, you may only use one paragraph out of an entire article. So there's a
Exactly.
whole bunch of other information on that page that you may have missed that may correlate or cause what you're mentioning in that one little paragraph that you used the information from. So it's, and then that one little sentence or paragraph taken out of context can actually impact how people react or, act on what they hear.
Right.
So those are things you have to be mindful of. And I have no choice. I don't have a preference over a news media outlet or anything like that. And I don't get my news from certain places. Like I know some people are very like, okay, I only watch this news network, and that's your choice. Do what you want to do. But for me, I just hear what they're saying. And then I go back and I look up the research and find out, okay, what are the details here? Like what's the situation? Because I try not to react directly to just one source.
Absolutely.
Because then I could be reacting to only 1% of the actual situation.
Right. And part of the reason research articles are written the way they're written is so that they can be replicated. They lay out exactly what they did, and it's not for the average reader because it's not entertaining at all.
Right.
But it's laid out step by step in order for their research to be peer reviewed. And what that means is someone else is going to try to replicate it. They're going to do the same study and see if they come up with the same outcomes. And the more something is peer reviewed, the more we can be assured that there's some real stuff coming out of that study. But I also want to say something else that kind of reflects on this is that when we do this, when we're doing what we're talking about right now, we look at the sources, we look at the numbers, we do all that, because it helps us make better decisions, because there is nothing worse, no worse feeling for me personally than to fly off the handle about something and find out that I was totally off base, and find out
we have to eat some
that I
humble
didn't have
pie
all the
then.
facts.
Yes, yes. This reminds me of, in the faithful community, we will call reactionary and quick to judgment. There's a word, a phrase, a nickname, if you will, for people in the faithful community to do that. We call them cherry pickers. And it's basically where you choose a scripture that backs up what you wanted to say, at least literally and figuratively in that one line that you gave it. But if you actually read the whole paragraph or the whole chapter, it really doesn't back up what you say, and you didn't,
And if you can't find if the scripture doesn't exactly fit it, you go find a translation that better fits it.
Yes, that is something that has been happening a lot lately in the faithful community. So, and I know all three of us, we profess our faith very loudly, and but it's a very dangerous thing to pick out a scripture and use it to just justify what you're feeling, or to justify what you're saying. And so again, we need discernment. We, in our research, right, there's only one word, right? But you have to use it in context of the whole thing, or otherwise you are cherry picking so you can get it to say what you want it to say.
Which is a good point, because even in the Bible, and that's a good example, because, okay, so here's the thing. The Bible was never written in English to begin with. It was written in Hebrew. It was written in Greek. It was written in Aramaic. And the words in that language do not directly translate into English. They took what was close enough.
5 different definitions for like one word, love, right?
Yeah. So like love, there's 4 different words in the Hebrew writing for love. And each word means something different. But in the English language, we have love.
Right.
We have love for friends. We have love for community. We have love for family. We have love for your spouse. 4 different versions of love. Yet in Hebrew, there's 4 different actual words for it. I can't think of the actual words at the moment, but that's a good point, because when the English, what we know is the King James was translated, that was done by King James. So they translated it, and now we have how many translations of the Bible? Like there's 30 to 50 translations of the Bible, and then there's like the translation they did in like the 1950s, and then like the NIV was translated in like the 70s, and then there was a new version of that in like the 80s, and then like the 90s, and then in 2011 they redid it again, because like the original NIV had just dear brothers, and now it's brothers and sisters, because to get it more, politically correct, which amen for some of that. But if you want to really study out the Bible, you need to go back to some of the scriptures and the phrases in the actual original text to get the true meaning of what they were trying to get across in those scriptures. So when people do cherry pick, do they really understand the actual scripture they're using?
Right. And it's also important to understand, part of how they translate it is through the understanding the culture of the times.
Right.
So that's another piece
Yeah.
of what's going on at the time.
Ancient Egyptian, a word was a picture. In Chinese, they have words like one picture represents a word or a phrase. And in English, we don't have those. So how do you translate that one little picture to, a phrase or something? It's very challenging.
It is. It's interesting that you brought that up, because I'm currently, writing my next
Right.
children's book, and I'm studying out Japanese culture. And I went to read some of the proverbs, Japanese proverbs, and I thought I would read one, and I'm a highly intelligent person, and I would read this phrase, and I thought that I knew what it meant, but then I would read what they were saying that it meant, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't get that out of that phrase. So yes, we have to understand culture, we have to understand society, we have to understand so many things, and I think that is very, very important to take into to effectually have that emotional intelligence. We have to be able to tap into all of these different things.
Right. And it's good to learn that. And I'm okay. So, and I'm not saying like you can't pick a scripture out of there and use it if you have a situation that it needs, but that also there's a scripture talking about you need to have an explanation for your reason for your faith. And so when you do come at somebody with a specific fact, and you want to say like try to persuade them to think your way, have the facts and try to have as much facts, truth that you can get, and try to set aside your opinion. Just like in an article, like in a newspaper, there's always that section that's like the opinion section. That's literally people's opinions of what's going on. But the rest of the newspaper, like they pride themselves on not sharing the opinions of the person who wrote that article. They are giving you the facts of what happened. So you just have to
I was gonna say that's how it's supposed to be.
It's so okay. That's how I took journalism in 9th grade. Things were different back then.
Right?
Yes,
Agreed.
And
EJ,
yes.
I did too. And I am totally blown away by how it looks right now.
Right. So there is, and again, I'm not gonna like sway either way to say like so and so does this, because I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. There are some media outlets and some things that maybe do, and that's they're doing what they want to do, and I'm not gonna stop it. But I just really try hard not to, go by the opinions of one specific source, because I have to weigh like what I believe, and I had to make the decision. Well, I will not say whether I did or did not, but I sought the advice of my medical doctor on regarding whether I should or should not get the vaccine for the most recent pandemic. I had that choice. I had to ask her, because I'm like, she knew my medical health. And if I'm trusting her with my health, of providing other medications for me to live and be healthy, I should at least trust her to give me the most valid information regarding whether it's going to be a good thing or not a good thing for me to do. And I did, and I got the advice, and I took the advice that she gave me, and I made a decision.
Right. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about how easy it is to lose your train of thought when you have a head cold.
Love it.
It was actually, oh, one of the things when I deal with the word facts, I have a bit of a reaction to, because this is just an example of something where I can be a little bit reactive. I always am very cautious when it comes to facts that are presented to me, because in the scientific world, very little is fact, honestly. Most of it's hypothesis, most of it's, they very rarely attribute the word fact to a conclusion.
Right.
Because my example is this: at one time, and this is kind of a weird example now presently, because there are people actually coming out and saying that they do believe this, but at one time it was fact that the earth was flat. At one time it was fact that the sun went around the earth.
Yeah.
At one time there were a lot of things that were considered facts, that were considered truths and absolutes.
Yeah.
Well, what my experience is other than outside, anything outside of my faith, that's a little bit different. It's a different topic and conversation. But when it comes to how the world is working around us, there is very little absolute facts.
Yes, I'm really glad you said that. One of the people in my life, one of the most influential people in my life was my great grandmother. I talk about her often, Mamo. And I was living with her for a short time. I was pregnant with my first child, and going to school, and young and eager, and I definitely, I don't know, I remember being that age and being so much more black and white than I am now. I'm so much more gray, as you said, and I don't mean that
Yeah,
to
me
say
too.
that
The gray's coming out a lot.
I try not to put that in the hair, but yes, my with that gray, I think comes grace and compassion and understanding. But I would come home from school, something that I learned, I was going at the time for certificates in hotel restaurant management and all of these things, because I grew up in the hospitality industry. And I would come home and be like, Mamo, you can't leave that chicken sitting on the counter like that. It's going to grow, whatever. And,
Right.
and she would laugh at me, and she'd be like, Lori, if I listened to everything that every,
Yep.
journalism, a professor, everybody said, she said, I'd go insane. And I was like, well, this is true. And she would say, I believe everything in moderation. I weigh it, I ponder it. I also use my own life experience or that of my families or trusted people around me. And then I make a decision that I feel, like you said, we have choice, that is best for me and those I love. So everything in moderation has kind of always been something that I've tried for. Something else, T, that I think is important to bring up. EJ, you said something about persuading someone. And so
I feel like that's happening a lot right now.
yes, it is. And I want to maybe just at least briefly touch on the fact that most healthy dialogue, filled with the emotional intelligence that I keep talking about, would hopefully not be about persuasion. It would simply, because So we get very passionate. There's reasons we're not supposed to talk about politics and religion and what was the other one? I don't remember, but you know, I know for me, one of the things when I was growing, you didn't socially anyway talk about sex or anything to do with that, out in a public forum, because
Right.
again, these are very private, personal, passionate things that we feel. But a healthy dialogue and a healthy reaction should hopefully not be driven, if it's not driven by right and wrong, should also not be driven by our need to persuade somebody. Because because we don't have to have ownership, right, of something. We don't have to prove something. We're not in a court of law. We're not trying to separate bone from marrow. We're actually in emotional intelligence and in our healthy reactions, just simply allowing, if there's no right and wrong, something to be said, right? And so if we have less passion and ownership behind it, T, what are your thoughts?
Well, one of them is what you're describing as assertive communication. It's communicating with someone, understanding that both parties have a need and both needs a matter. Another thing that kind of came up for me was thought errors. So there are a lot of types of thought errors, but some of the ones I see a lot lately are like all or nothing. It's either all this or it's nothing. Another one is generalization. So if it works for this, it must work for everybody or everything. So an example of that is like if I'm getting out of a breakup and I say men are evil, that's because of my one experience, or maybe a handful, who knows, but must mean all men are evil. That's generalization. But it's the all or nothing or concrete thinking that tends to lend toward miscommunication and not being able to meet in the middle. And the other thing too is what you were just, when you said always feeling like you're in the court of law, it's because we're living in the land of judgment.
We are, unfortunately.
That's what judging does. It makes us all feel like we either have to be guilty, we're either guilty or not guilty. And but discernment is more in that assertive communication field, in that we're allowing others to have opinions and thoughts and ways of being, but just understanding what works for ourselves or not, and it's without judgment. So those are just some things that popped into my mind.
Yeah, I feel like we could keep talking about this, but I think we'll wrap it up here, because I think it's this is a good topic, and I think we'll talk about it more. And I'm glad we decided to do it, because I think we've been going for a little over a year now, and we haven't really touched too much on more public stuff. And I definitely don't want to like say that you can't be active and make a difference and have an opinion and have a thought, but just be careful when you try to express it, because I feel like that's when things start to change. And I mean, I know friendships that have been broken and lost because of a decision or a reaction to something that happened.
Right.
And I know for us, like I have my people that I can go to and I can trust to say, this is how I'm feeling about this situation. And they're not going to judge me or think any less of me because of that. But those things, I wouldn't go out and like make a public statement on it. And, I just be careful and be mindful of what's out there. And, where there's influence all over the place. So just be careful.
I think it might be interesting, and this is, if people are interested in this, please let us know, but it might be interesting for us to pick a topic that we may not all have, the three of us may not have the same exact opinion about, and model what that conversation can look like on one of these episodes of what it's like to have differing opinions among three people who care very much about each other, the people, and how
Right.
we can have discussions about those things. So that might be something we could do.
Yeah, do like a mock discussion. That would be cool.
I like that. So I just want to say thank you, ladies, for indulging my desire to kind of be relevant and be current with what is going on within our society today. And thanks for engaging in a very healthy way with me, just being very broad and open-minded and using our emotional intelligence to share our opinions and to talk about where we find those facts and to engage in healthy dialogue. But I really like that idea, T. And so if you guys are interested, our listeners are interested in that, please let us know. We'd love to be able to do that. I like to model what I like to see out there in the real world, so to speak. So
And let us know if you want it to be a serious, real topic, like current events and whatnot, or even something mildly silly, just to have some fun with it, or both. Maybe we can model both. I don't know, but I think that one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is that people aren't modeling those things. We're not seeing a lot of healthy communicators out there. And so it creates this environment that we've even had to use in this episode, in that we're very careful what we say, because we know not everybody is going to agree with one thing or other, and there's just such hot topics. But that's unfortunate, because as long as we're avoiding the conversation, we're avoiding solutions.
Right.
oh, so true, my friend.
Well, just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This episode is available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. If you don't use social media, you can also email us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. Feel free to review us on Anchor, comment on our YouTube channel, leave feedback on the platform you listen to us on, or message us through our social media or email, because we'd like to hear what you think. If there is a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, feel free to message us and we'll see about making it happen. You can find me, EJ, on Twitter and Instagram as EJ8302. You can find T's other podcast on Facebook, and it's called Our Journey with Jesus. You can find Lori on Twitter as Carpe Sparrow Lori L, and on Instagram and Facebook as Carpe Sparrow Lori Lee. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.